300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malcolm with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Monday morning. A lot of great stuff to talk about. I will touch on Scottie Scheffler winning the Masters. That's coming up later. Even a new report coming out that Ben Simmons could be returning for the postseason. I'm going to touch on that, but I first have to start with the breaking news from last night. It was reported by Woj that the former, now Los Angeles Lakers head coach Frank Vogel is expected to be fired today, officially done with his tenure in Los Angeles. Now, obviously, this came seconds after the Lakers capped off their disappointing season with a 146-141 overtime win over the Denver Nuggets. That's when the report was then dropped, right? So obviously, Frank Vogel lasted 3 turbulent seasons, but this isn't a surprise. We kind of expected this to come down the pipe, and the fact that he lasted 3 turbulent seasons actually says a lot about Frank Vogel, given the fact that he was destined for an exit ever since his arrival. Because if we think about it, Frank Vogel wasn't ever the Lakers' top choice. In fact, he was actually the 4th choice overall. Ty Lue was the first choice, but the Lakers wouldn't grant him his own staff. He didn't get to pick his own staff. They also only offered him 3 years as opposed to a 5-year contract. You had Jason Kidd, who was the next top choice, but because of his checkered past, the Lakers felt it'd be too controversial of a hire to make him the head coach. So instead, they made him the associate head coach under Frank Vogel, he was just gunning for Frank Vogel's job from day one. And then even Monty Williams was the Lakers' preferred head coaching candidate over Frank Vogel. So really, even since his arrival, since day one, he's essentially been acting as a lame duck head coach. That's just the reality. It's fair to say, given the fact that he only lasted 3 seasons. Now, by winning a championship in his first season, and they did do that, he quelled a lot of the heat after the 2019-2020 season and actually earned himself a 1-year extension through the 2022-2023 season. However, the fact that his extension was only an additional year, a puny extension like that shows and it signals the reservations that the Lakers brass still had about him as a head coach. And clearly they were a little bit reticent to give him a long-term commitment. They had reservations about his ability to continue to coach this team at a high level beyond the next few years. And so anytime a championship winning coach only earns a 1-year extension, that's pretty much a harbinger that they don't have a lot of confidence in that individual. And so you win the title in year 1. Year 2 is defined by injuries that derailed the team. You're plagued from the very start, but because they at least qualified for the postseason, they got out of the play-in tournament. They played the Phoenix Suns, lost in 6 games to the eventual Western Conference champs. AD was injured for the majority of that series. When he was healthy, they were up 2-1. So he was kind of given a pass for last season. And then this year was the breaking point. You go 33-49 overall, 18-24 after the All-Star break when you're unable to make any moves as a Lakers organization. And it ends up becoming a massive underachievement. And now the nightmare of a season is officially over. And I'll say this again because I've mentioned this repeatedly, that I don't think that the Lakers' failures this year are all because of Frank Vogel. And I think that Frank Vogel wasn't simply fired because of his inability to win games. Coaches win and lose games all the time. I think that he was fired because of his inability to make this team a competitive team, to be able to get through to the players to compete. They had a lack of competitive spirit all year. He had an inability, Frank Vogel did, to extract the most out of each guy and to help them reach their full potential. That's the job of a head coach. It's not a job of a head coach to win or lose games. At the end of the day, the players have to execute on the field, on the court, on whatever surface they're playing on. But it is the job of the head coach to put them in the best position and situation to be successful, to elicit and extract the most out of them, to be able to motivate them, to inspire them to play competitively, to compete. And Frank Vogel this year just had a difficult time getting through to those Lakers players. They were shutting out his messages. They weren't really listening to him. And that he should be accountable for. And that, unfortunately, while it's resulted in him being canned, if you can't get through to your players, then that's a problem. And it's unfortunate that he has to kind of bear the brunt of this and be crucified for it. Again, I think that Frank Vogel, it's not entirely his fault for what's happened. He's had to kind of be a public punching bag for this entire season. And I think that he is a good head coach. I think he'll land on his feet. He'll land another head coaching job in the near future. But with this organization, again, I don't think he was fired because of his inability to overcome a poor roster construction or to overcome a lack of athleticism or to overcome all of the injuries that derailed this team. He was fired because of his inability to put out a competitive team that played hard night in and night out, that competed night in and night out. And unfortunately, regardless of all of those other factors, with this specific organization, that's not going to work. They've set themselves apart because of those higher standards, and that's the reason why they're deciding to move on in a different direction. And obviously, again, the inconsistent lineups, the unavailability of a lot of players didn't help the situation. The Lakers apparently were the only team in the NBA to not have a single 5-man lineup play 100 minutes together. That is 2.5 full games. So that right there is a little snapshot of what the Lakers were dealing with all season. Now, I will say, I thought it was very classless on the part of either Woj or whichever outlet was reporting this, to report this seconds after they win their season finale. And while he's still at the post-game presser, you're asking him about the reports and the rumors that he's about to be fired tomorrow. Have some decency. Show a little bit more class to Frank Vogel. He doesn't deserve that. No one deserves to be told that they're going to be fired right after they win their final game of the year. At least wait a couple hours till they return to the team hotel But to do it just a couple seconds after you win, I thought that was a classless move personally. And I thought that he deserved better than that. But needless to say, now the season is officially over. Unfortunate, they'll probably announce this firing very, very soon. Transitioning to another interesting story from the NBA, the Brooklyn Nets and Ben Simmons. There's been some reports that Ben Simmons could be available, might be able to make a return for the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs if the Brooklyn Nets were able to advance past the play-in tournament that begins, I believe, tomorrow on Tuesday, if not sometime this week. Now, if he was to return for the Eastern Conference first round, there were reports saying that he likely wouldn't be ready for games 1 and 2. But he's had several weeks of pain-free progressions, which is what's fueled all this hope about and all this optimism about a potential return for Ben Simmons. He obviously had an epidural shot in his mid-back or in his lower back in mid-March to subdue some pain and irritation because of a herniated disc in his lower back. So this is all the context. And obviously we last saw Ben Simmons play in June, I believe like June 20th of 2021, nearly 10 months ago was the last time that we saw Ben Simmons on a basketball court actually play in a game. But here's the thing that's always struck me about this evolving story is when he was still in Philadelphia, he wanted out of the 76ers organization and basically was forced to show up to the 76ers practice facility to collect a paycheck. When he was practicing with them in his sweats, with his phone in his pocket, there was no mention of any back injury or any lingering back injury at the time. When the trade deadline was approaching, nearing, there were no reports about any back injuries that he was dealing with or that might complicate the trade, because normally NBA teams like to do a background health check on the players they're trading for. So there were no single reports like that. And even following the trade, they didn't report any lingering back issues for Ben Simmons. Now, I'm not wanting to question the legitimacy of Ben Simmons' back injury, but to me, this whole situation just seems ridiculous. And it seems a bit dubious, because how does someone damage their back so much without playing a single basketball game in 10 months? Now, I understand he's been practicing on his own, and it's always possible that with someone who is 6'10", 240 pounds, there are ways to injure your back even while practicing on your own. We obviously saw John Wall after he tore his Achilles, after he tore his ACL, he ruptured his Achilles slipping in his own bathtub in his house, and he ruptured his Achilles. So there are extenuating circumstances where that happens, but there hadn't been any reports about something similar to that regarding Ben Simmons. So it just makes me question the whole legitimacy of this. And again, I said this back when he first wanted out of Philadelphia, and I don't want to discount his mental health claims, because it is a legitimate issue that people are dealing with, millions of people are dealing with every single day. But I firmly believed that he used the mental health struggles as a crutch to shield him from the backlash and the ignominy that was coming in his direction after that series loss to the Atlanta Hawks last season. And he didn't have the stomach to face his coaches, to face his teammates after that series. He didn't want to have to endure that. He didn't want to have to deal with that. He didn't want to have to deal with the fans in Philadelphia. And everyone kind of believed that once he was traded to the Brooklyn Nets, that he'd be ready to go. Again, there weren't any reports immediately following the trade to Brooklyn that he had back injuries. He had a herniated disc. So I've just kind of been skeptical from the very start. I've always been a little bit skeptical. There's something missing. There's something missing in this saga that I can't fully understand. And again, I'm not saying I disagree with his overall decision to have won out of Philadelphia in the first place. I'm not saying I disagree with his approach to being traded. You have to do what you have to do in the best interest of yourself to move to another location. But everything's just felt very opaque. There's been a lack of transparency. And I've just been kind of dubious from the very beginning as to what's truly going on. Then you have reports yesterday, of course, saying that he should be available. He could be available for the first round of the Eastern Conference Finals. And then Steve Nash comes out. There's a report a minute later of Steve Nash refuting that claim. So clearly there's some disconnect there. And they're not on the same page. And they're trying to downplay his potential availability. And just that whole dynamic just doesn't seem to make sense. And I'm just kind of dubious at this point about the whole situation. I just don't understand how he's not healthy, how he's not playing. I really don't. So we'll see what happens. They obviously ruled him out for the play-in tournament and only made him potentially available for this Eastern Conference first round if they were to get there. Now, obviously, right now, the standings are set. The Brooklyn Nets would be the 7th seed. If they were to win, they're going to face the Cavs in the first play-in. The Boston Celtics, due to the tiebreaker over the Milwaukee Bucks, are in the 2nd seed. The Bucks dropped to 3rd. They didn't play any of their guys last night. So if the Brooklyn Nets were to win, they'd face the Boston Celtics. And quite frankly, without Robert Williams, I think that was one of the 2 series, along with the Celtics and Miami, that I felt the Brooklyn Nets right out of the gates had a good chance of winning. They had a good chance of winning. But we'll see what ultimately happens with Ben Simmons. But again, I just have been skeptical from the very beginning, personally. Okay. So I want to transition to the Masters. Scottie Scheffler, the American and the world golf #1, wins the Masters. He won the Masters yesterday, shooting a -10 under par, 278 for the tournament, winning his first green jacket in just his 2nd year on the tour at age 25 years old. It was an incredible way to cap off what's been really a torrid 2.5 months for Scheffler, in which he had won entering the Masters 3 of the past 5 tournaments. Now he's won 4 of the past 6 tournaments. He had won the Phoenix Open a couple months ago. He'd won the Arnold Invitational in a comeback fashion back at Bay Hill. He had won a match play in Texas that allowed him to rise to #1. So he was riding extremely high going into the Masters, all in this shortened time period. And mind you, just about 56 days ago, now make it 57, Scheffler was still trying to win his first PGA Tour tournament. His first one. Not even a full 2 months ago was he still trying to win his first ever tournament. And so it's been a roller coaster ride for him, and it culminates in a green jacket. And really, he'd been dominant from the very beginning, especially from the 2nd round on Friday, because he led after Friday by 5 shots. He headed into Sunday with a 3-shot lead. And he's just been so consistent. He's been a model of consistency on the tour over this little stretch. And again, he had a 3-shot lead heading into Sunday. But what was impressive about me, or what impressed me about him, was how calm, cool, and collected he was throughout that final Sunday. I mean, obviously you can extend it throughout the entire tournament, but in particular on that Sunday, because here he was paired with Cameron Smith, who started off the fourth and final Sunday championship round, birdieing the first 2 holes. So he's already trimmed the deficit to 1, and yet you've got a guy in Scottie Scheffler who was just impervious to that pressure, impervious to all the roars that weren't for him, that were either for Rory, that were for Tiger, for other guys on the tour. And yet he was able to block out all of that noise and just focus on making every putt, getting into the green. I mean, what was impressive to me is he's not a flashy golfer. He was not someone who was needing to rely on heroics, to maneuver out of tough situations, to hit out of the rough a lot. His tee shots, he was practically hitting the fairway after every single tee shot. So he was setting himself up beautifully. The approach shots weren't the most difficult. He wasn't having to hit many bunker shots. He was lifting them close to the pins, at least giving himself chance after chance after chance on the greens. So most of his shots were really good shots. Again, he wasn't needing some heroic chip shot or, again, a bunker shot. I mean, he was just finding the greens and hitting close to the pins time and time again. And that's really impressive, because especially in a moment like that, where you've got someone breathing down your neck, and then you go into 12 by Amen Corner, and here you've got Cameron Smith who plunks it into the water, and you still retain the same focus to clear the little kind of moat that's right before the hole. It was impressive for him. It was impressive for him. Again, he never had to be kind of too aggressive on his approach shots. And obviously early on, he was a little bit slow out of the gates in the first couple of holes, but then started to find his rhythm. You saw him get a couple birdie putts throughout the front 9, and just kind of rode this wave. And again, with the exception of the 18th hole and the final hole, where he had a Masters victory on the line, he had a 5-shot lead to play with the exception of perhaps those external factors resulting in him missing a couple gimme putts pretty much every single time. And you could argue whether it's a lack of concentration, whether it's the pressure of knowing you're about to win the Masters from a foot away, with the exception of those few misses, pretty much any time he was within 5 to 6 feet of the pin and of the hole, he was making those putts. And ultimately, that's what typically the Masters, and that's what typically all these majors come down to is, okay, all these guys can hit tee shots extremely well. They can use their approach shots to set themselves up. How's your putting game? And Scheffler was fantastic. Again, with the exception of that final hole, it was remarkable just the way that he methodically and surgically went through this entire course 4 straight days. Just really, really consistent. And that's something that stood out to me. Obviously, Rory made a late push, but again, he needed heroics to shoot that incredible 64 under on the final day. Scottie Scheffler was just every single day grinding out holes, collecting birdies, staying disciplined, staying focused. And again, for him to just be 25 years old and in his second full season on the tour to win the Masters, it's truly remarkable. He's already earned $10 million in tournament earnings just over the last 3-4 months. And what stood out to me is he said in his postgame remark how he wasn't even 1 year old. He wasn't even a year old when Tiger Woods won the Masters in 1997. Just for some context, because it's been 25 years. And speaking of Tiger, it was extremely impressive that he even made the cut. That was impressive that he even played in the tournament. But for Scottie Scheffler, big shout out. It's great to see another American ascending in the sport. There have been so many great American golfers as of the last 10, 15 years, not just Tiger. Again, you've had Brooks Koepka, Jordan Spieth, Scheffler, Justin Thomas. Thomas is English, but you have just so many different guys. Again, with Koepka and Scheffler and Dustin Johnson. So it's impressive to see this guy continue to ascend in the rankings and to really back up that number one ranking in the world of golf. So major congratulations to Scottie Scheffler. That was extremely impressive performance that he put on yesterday, winning the Masters. Okay, final topic, my Mickelson moments. I have some great Mickelson moments sticking with the Masters. First, I have to give a shout out to Scottie Scheffler, who I just talked about, winning his first ever major, collecting his first green jacket. Again, just his second full year on the tour. Shot a 10 under, 278 for the tournament, which is highly impressive. Here's what's even more impressive about Scottie Scheffler. He joined Ian Woosnam in 1991 as the only players to win a major, and both in this instance were at the Masters, in their debuts as number one in the world. And that's a profound stat to be a part of, because oftentimes we see when someone's ranked number one, it's hard for them to back it up in those major tournaments. We've seen it in tennis sometimes. Now we're seeing it in golf. There have been examples like Jason Day, who had ascended to number one, but wasn't able to win at the Masters, didn't quite have his best stuff. Scottie Scheffler, in his debut as a debutant as the number one overall ranking, heading into the Masters, is able to win it. That speaks highly about who he is and the trajectory that he's on. And sticking with the Masters, I teased Rory McIlroy and his historical day. I have to stay with that. He finished second at the Masters, which, by the way, is the highest finish that he's ever had. He's finished in the top 10 6 times at the Masters, but he's never won. But this was the first time that he actually finished as the silver medalist at Augusta. But what's impressive, he holed out from the bunker in the final hole to shoot a 64 in the final round, which tied a record low set at Augusta of all time. Again, he finished 7 under for the tournament, but that was an incredible final round to actually put him into very real contention. Now, again, the final score, Scheffler missed two gimmies, I think, out of pressure right on the 18th hole. But regardless, McIlroy finished second and capped it off. He culminated his tournament with an incredible final round. Major shout out to him. Major shout out to Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets. He made history. The Nuggets star became the first NBA player ever in the history of the game with 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, and 500 assists all in one season. He's likely to win back-to-back MVPs. I know I made a case for Giannis a couple weeks ago. That was not to discount what Nikola Jokic is doing. Both he, Embiid, and Giannis all have compelling cases. I would not be disappointed at all if Nikola Jokic won the MVP. Be very deserving of it. He's been averaging about 26 points, 14 rebounds, 8 assists, over 55% shooting from the floor. The guy's been an absolute beast. He's been playing without Jamal Murray, without Michael Porter Jr. for the bulk of the season, obviously without Jamal Murray the entire season, and yet he's positioned the Nuggets as a top 6 seed and firmly in the playoffs this postseason. It's impressive. He deserves a lot of credit for that. So major shout out to him. And finally, major shout out to Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid won the NBA's scoring title officially. He capped it off, averaging 30.6 points per game. He clinched it ahead of Giannis, clinched it ahead of LeBron. LeBron would have been ineligible to win because he was He didn't qualify because he didn't play enough games to qualify. But regardless, Embiid finished the season 30.6 points, at least the regular season, 30.6 points per game, 11.7 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 1.5 blocks, over 50% shooting from the floor, 37% from three, over 80% from the free throw line. He's been an offensive scoring machine all season long. He's the first center to lead the NBA in scoring since Shaquille O'Neal did it in 1999 and 2000 with the Lakers. It's the last time that we've seen a center do it. And he's just the fourth center to do it since 1980, because he's actually the first center to average 30 points per game since Moses Malone averaged those numbers in the 1981-1982 season. So again, we'll see how that translates into the postseason for Joel Embiid and the 76ers, but individually, he's had an absolutely fantastic season. So major shout out to him. Well, that'll do it for us, ending a couple minutes early right here on Morning Joe. Thank you so much for tuning into Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah_Malkin or at morning_Joe_. Instagram, JMalk97, TikTok, Jonah Malkin. As always, have a lovely rest of your morning.